Okay, imagine this scenario. You've borrowed a friend's car. You know you need to fill the tank before returning it, but you have absolutely no idea what kind of fuel it takes. And your friend, completely unreachable.
Right. What do you actually do?
Exactly. Do you just, guess, risk wrecking their engine? Or do you bring it back totally empty, which feels pretty awkward?
It's a small thing, maybe, but it's a genuine moral puzzle. And we face these kinds of puzzles, big and small, all the time.
We really do. We make countless decisions, but we don't often stop and think about the underlying sort of rules or frameworks we're using to decide what's actually right.
Yeah, the why behind the what.
Precisely. And that's our mission for this deep dive. We're going to explore the fascinating world of normative moral theories. These are the big, organized ways of thinking about morality that help guide our behavior.
We'll look at different frameworks, some really ancient ones from the East, some more modern Western ideas. The goal is to give you some tools to think about your own moral compass.
And maybe discover some surprising angles on what right could mean. Is it about consequences, duty, your character, maybe even relationships, or just going with the natural flow?
It's all about understanding those deeper currents beneath our everyday choices.
Okay, so let's map this out a bit. Ethics, fundamentally, is that branch of philosophy looking at morality, trying to define right and wrong.
And within ethics, there are different levels. There's meta-ethics, asking really abstract questions like, where do morals come from, or is morality objective? And applied ethics, which looks at specific issues like AI or euthanasia. But our focus today is normative ethics.
Right, the part that tries to establish standards for how we should act. It deals with our choices, our responsibility.
And these normative theories, they're not just for philosophers in armchairs. They offer real frameworks, consistent ways to think through tricky situations and guide our actions.
They help us navigate that moral maze we mentioned.
That's the idea.
So what are the main approaches we'll be digging into?
Well, we'll focus on three core types. First, there's consequentialism, judging actions by their outcomes.
Okay.
Second, deontology, focusing on duties and rules, regardless of the outcome.
Right.
And third, virtue ethics, which says right action comes from having good character.
Consequences, duty, character, three different starting points.
Each uses a different yardstick for figuring out what's moral. We'll also touch on some other fascinating perspectives like Taoism and feminist ethics.
Great. Let's start with consequentialism. The basic idea sounds simple. An action is right if it leads to the best overall consequences for everyone affected.
Right. It's about maximizing the good, weighing up the costs and benefits, but impartially, not just for yourself.
And this isn't just a modern Western idea, is it?
Not at all. You see a really interesting early form in ancient China with Mohism. This came about during the Warring States period, a time of incredible chaos and suffering.
So a response to social breakdown?
The founder, Muzi, saw the intense suffering and believed the root cause was partiality, people only caring about themselves, their family, their state. His radical solution was built around four concepts.
Okay.
Morality, or yi, he said, is determined by bringing about benefit, or li. That means material well-being, social order, things that actually help people.
Makes sense. Benefit for the people.
But that benefit, li, rests on ren, a kind of deep benevolence or kindness that makes you look beyond yourself. And that leads to I, which is often translated as inclusive or universal care.
Universal care, so caring for everyone equally.
Exactly. Impartial care. Muzi argued that promoting the overall benefit, treating everyone's interests as equally important, was the most rational and ultimately beneficial way to create social harmony. It was a direct challenge to the elites who were just focused on their own gain.
Wow, that's quite radical for its time. Advocating for meritocracy, condemning aggression, being moderate with resources, all for the collective good.
It was very pragmatic, socially focused consequentialism.
Okay, let's jump forward and westward to utilitarianism. Probably the consequentialist theory most people have heard of.
Right. Utilitarianism also focuses on outcomes, but it specifically defines the good as utility, which usually means happiness or pleasure.
Jeremy Bentham, John Stuart Mill, those are the key names.
Yes. Bentham first really articulated the principle of utility, and Mill refined it. Mill's formulation is famous. Actions are right in proportion as they tend to promote happiness, wrong as they tend to produce the reverse of happiness.
So our moral obligation is to maximize happiness for everyone involved.
That's the core idea. Maximize happiness, minimize suffering.
This brings us to thought experiments like the trolley problem, doesn't it? That really puts the theory to the test.
It does, the classic version. A runaway trolley is heading towards 5 people tied to the track. You're standing by a lever. If you pull it, the trolley switches to another track where only one person is tied up.
Uh-huh. The uncomfortable choice.
From a simple utilitarian standpoint, the calculation seems clear. Pull the lever.
Because saving 5 lives produces more overall happiness or less suffering than saving 1.
Exactly. 5 lives saved outweighs 1 life lost. The net outcome is better for the greatest number. It feels difficult, maybe even wrong, to actively cause someone's death, but the utilitarian focuses on the consequences.
But didn't Mill add some nuance here, something about different kinds of pleasure?
He did, and it's a really important point. Bentham's view was more quantitative, just add up the pleasure units. Mill argued pleasures differ in quality. He distinguished higher pleasures, intellectual, artistic, social ones, from lower pleasures, basic sensory ones.
Like reading poetry versus eating a nice meal.
Sort of. He famously said, "It is better to be a human being dissatisfied than a pig satisfied. Better to be Socrates dissatisfied than a fool satisfied." Meaning that the quality matters. Engaging our higher faculties, even if it leads to some dissatisfaction, like Socrates wrestling with philosophical problems, is ultimately more valuable, contributes more to true human flourishing than simple contentment. Dissatisfaction can even spur us on to improve things.
So it's not just about maximizing any pleasure, but prioritizing those higher quality experiences for the greatest number.
Right, and it requires impartiality. You have to act like a disinterested and benevolent spectator, setting aside your own biases.
Okay, that's consequentialism. Now let's shift gears completely to deontology, the study of duty.
Yeah, this approach is fundamentally different. Deontology says the morality of an action lies in the action itself, in whether it follows certain rules or duties, not in its consequences.
And the big name here is Immanuel Kant.
For Kant, the only thing that has unconditional moral worth is a goodwill.
Goodwill. What does that mean exactly?
It means choosing to do your moral duty simply because it's your duty, not because you want something out of it or because it feels good, but purely out of respect for the moral law itself. That's what makes an action truly moral.
And he tied this to human reason.
Very strongly. Kant believed our capacity for reason is what makes us unique and gives us moral agency. Reason allows us to step back from our desires and impulses and figure out what the moral law requires. Acting rationally is acting morally.
So how do we figure out these moral laws or duties?
Kant argued we discover them a priori, just through reason, without needing experience. He called them maxims. And he distinguished between 2 types of commands or imperatives.
Okay.
Hypothetical imperatives are conditional. If you want X, then do Y. Like if you want good grades, study hard.
Yeah.
It's about achieving a specific goal.
Right, a means to an end.
But categorical imperatives are different. They're absolute commands that we must follow no matter what we desire. They're universal moral laws derived from reason itself. It's our duty.
And he had a famous way of testing if a maxim could be a categorical imperative, right? The universal law formulation.
Yes. Act only according to that maxim through which you can, at the same time, that it become a universal law.
So could you walk us through an example, like the lying example again?
Sure. Imagine your maxim is, it's okay to lie to get a discount. Now try to universalize that. What if everyone lied whenever it was convenient for a discount?
Well, the whole system of pricing and trust would break down. No one would believe anyone. Lying wouldn't even work anymore to get the discount.
Exactly. You can't rationally will a world where that maxim is a universal law because it undermines itself. Therefore, the maxim fails the test, and lying for a discount is morally wrong, according to Kant, regardless of the consequences.
It forces a kind of consistency check. He also had another formulation about treating people as ends.
Yes, the humanity formulation.
Yeah.
So, act that you use humanity in your own person, as well as in the person of any other, always at the same time as an end, never merely as a means.
So lying to someone uses them just as a tool for your own goal.
Precisely. You're disrespecting their rational nature, their ability to make their own informed choices based on the truth. You're treating them merely as a means to your discount, not as a person with inherent worth.
Kant's system seems very logical, but also very rigid. What happens if duties seem to conflict?
That's a major challenge, and leads us to thinkers like W.D. Ross, who offered a more pluralistic deontology.
Pluralistic, meaning multiple principles.
Yeah. Ross thought that both utilitarianism and Kantianism tried too hard to find one single ultimate moral principle. He argued that our moral life is more complex. We face multiple, sometimes competing moral duties.
Like your example earlier. An armed person asks where your neighbor is hiding. Kant says, don't lie. But there's also a strong intuition, a duty perhaps, to protect innocent life.
Right. What do you do then? Ross's idea was that we have several prima facie duties that are binding at first sight.
Prima facie, like on the face of it.
Exactly. These are self-evident moral commitments we recognize through experience. Things like fidelity, keeping promises, reparation, making amends, gratitude, justice, beneficence, doing good, self-improvement, and non-maleficence, not causing harm.
So a list of duties, but not absolute.
Correct. They aren't ranked in a strict hierarchy, and none is absolute. In any given situation, we have to use our judgment to figure out which prima facie duty is our actual duty in those particular circumstances.
How do we do that?
By carefully considering all the relevant facts and weighing the competing prima facie duties. We try to choose the action that results in the greatest balance of prima facie rightness over wrongness. So in the hiding neighbor case, the duty of non-maleficence, not causing harm to your neighbor, would likely override the duty of fidelity, telling the truth to the armed person.
So it brings judgment and context back into the picture while still being duty-focused.
Yes, it tries to capture the complexity of moral decision-making better.
Okay, so we've had consequences and duties. Let's move to the third major approach, virtue ethics. This shifts the focus again, right?
Completely. Instead of asking, what is the right action? Virtue ethics asks, what kind of person should I be? The focus is on cultivating good character traits, or virtues.
Like honesty, courage, compassion.
The idea is that if you cultivate these virtues, the right actions will naturally follow. It's less about rules, more about becoming a good person who instinctively knows and does the right thing. The goal is often described as achieving eudaimonia, a state of human flourishing or living well.
And this has deep roots too, doesn't it, in both East and West?
In ancient China, we have Confucianism. Like Mohism, it arose during the Warring States period, seeking to restore social harmony. But Confucius focused intensely on personal virtue and its role within society.
He emphasized relationships, right? Knowing your place and acting accordingly.
Very much so. Confucian ethics is deeply relational. Virtue isn't just an internal quality. It's expressed in how you fulfill your social roles. Son, father, ruler, subject, filial piety, respect for elders, loyalty. These were key virtues tied to specific relationships within an ordered hierarchical society.
Understanding the human dance, as you called it earlier.
And lie, ritual, and practice was crucial. These weren't empty ceremonies. They were tools for cultivating virtue, for shaping your character over time. The ideal figure was the junzi, the exemplary person who embodies virtue and lives according to the Tao, the proper way or path.
A moral role model.
Yes. And rulers especially had a duty to be a junzi because their character would influence the entire society. Confucius famously said something like, if the ruler is virtuous, the people will be too, like grass bending in the wind.
Now, shifting to ancient Greece, we have Aristotle, another giant of virtue ethics.
Indeed. For Aristotle, the ultimate aim, like we said, is eudaimonia, flourishing. And we achieve that through arete, excellence, or virtue.
And he connected virtue to rationality.
Yes. He argued that what's unique about humans is our capacity for reason. So human virtue, human excellence, involves perfecting our rational abilities, both in thinking and in acting.
And he had that famous idea of virtue as a mean between extremes.
The golden mean, exactly. Courage, for instance, is the mean between the deficiency of cowardice and the excess of rashness. Generosity is the mean between stinginess and extravagance. Finding that right balance, that mean, is virtue.
But how do we find it? How do we cultivate these virtues?
Through habit. This is crucial for Aristotle. He said, we become just by doing just acts, brave by doing brave acts. It's like learning a craft. You practice, you develop the right habits and dispositions, and over time, acting virtuously becomes second nature. A good upbringing helps instill these habits early on.
Practice makes perfect, or at least virtuous.
Something like that. And relationships were important for Aristotle too, especially friendship.
Right, you mentioned he wrote a lot about friendship.
He did. He saw humans as fundamentally social beings. Perfect friendships for him weren't based on usefulness or pleasure, but on mutual recognition of each other's good character. Friends wish each other well for their own sake. A true friend, he said, is like another self, helping you to see yourself more clearly and grow in virtue.
Okay, let's explore another really distinct perspective. Taoism, also from that Warring States period in China.
Yes, and like Confucianism and Mohism, it was seeking harmony amidst chaos. But Taoism took a very different approach. It saw the root of suffering in human desires, greed, and our attempts to force things, to impose artificial structures on the world.
So the solution is less structure, More naturalness.
Taoism suggests living in accordance with the Tao. Now, the Tao here is something deeper than the Confucian path. It's the fundamental, natural way of the universe, the underlying principle or source of everything. It's formless, boundless, the ultimate reality from which everything arises and returns.
Yeah, that sounds quite mystical.
It can feel that way.
Yeah.
The Tao Te Ching, the core text attributed to Laozi, uses paradoxical language because the Tao itself is beyond easy definition. It's about realizing the interconnectedness of all things and living in harmony with that natural flow.
So morality in Taoism is about aligning with this natural way.
Yes. A moral life is one that is simple, calm, free from excessive striving and desires, lived in tune with nature. It involves a kind of naturalism, rooting our actions in the way things naturally are, rather than imposing artificial rules.
This leads to the idea of wu wei, right? Which sounds like non-action.
It's often translated that way, but it's misleading. Wu Wei isn't about doing nothing. It's about effortless action, acting spontaneously and effectively by being in harmony with the Tao. It's like the skilled artisan who works intuitively, without struggle, or water flowing naturally around obstacles.
Acting with the flow, not against it.
It involves moving from an attitude of separateness and control to one of connectedness and receptivity. Taoism often praises softness and yielding over hardness and assertion. By being receptive and moving with the current rather than resisting it, you find harmony and effectiveness.
Fascinating. A very different feel from the other theories. Okay, finally, let's turn to feminist theories of ethics. This brings a critical lens to the whole history we've been discussing.
Feminism, broadly, aims to end sexism and achieve social justice. Feminist ethics specifically examines how traditional moral theories have often been biased by gender and seeks to correct that.
How so? What's the core critique?
A major point is that historically, many influential moral theories, while claiming to be universal and objective, implicitly took the male experience as the default human experience.
So women's perspectives, interests, and experiences were often ignored or devalued.
And traits traditionally associated with men like reason, strength, autonomy were often presented as the moral ideal, while traits associated with women like emotion, care, interdependence were seen as secondary or even as moral weaknesses.
Simone de Beauvoir's idea that one is not born but rather becomes a woman fits here. That femininity is a social construct.
Yes, that's a key insight. Gender roles and expectations aren't natural givens. They're socially constructed. And historically, these constructs have been used to limit women's autonomy and opportunities.
Some early feminist thinkers explored different approaches based on gender, didn't they? Like Carol Gilligan's work.
Right. Gilligan's research suggested that men and women often approached moral dilemmas differently. Men tended to focus on abstract principles of justice and rights, while women often focused on relationships, responsibilities, and the specific context, a care perspective.
And this led to the development of the ethics of care.
Yes, the ethics of care emerged as a distinct approach that explicitly values caring, relationships, empathy, and attending to the needs of specific individuals in concrete situations. It challenges the traditional emphasis on abstract rules and impartiality.
So it uses the relationship between a caregiver and the person being cared for as a model.
That's a central paradigm. It emphasizes responsiveness, compassion, and acting in the best interest of those who are vulnerable or dependent. Thinkers like Nell Noddings argued for the moral importance of partiality, recognizing that our relationships create special obligations.
Which contrasts sharply with, say, Moist impartiality or Kantian universalism.
It does. Care ethics suggests that sensitivity to specific relational contexts is actually a moral strength, particularly for understanding the needs of marginalized groups.
And how does intersectionality fit into feminist ethics?
Intersectionality is a crucial concept, highlighting that aspects of identity, like gender, race, class, sexuality, disability, etc., don't exist in isolation. They intersect to shape a person's unique experiences, including experiences of oppression or privilege.
So you can't just talk about women's experiences as if all women are the same.
Exactly. Ignoring intersectionality risks focusing only on the experiences of the most privileged women, example, white, middle-class, straight women, and overlooking the distinct challenges faced by others. It pushes for a more inclusive understanding of justice and oppression and helps build solidarity across different groups who face overlapping forms of discrimination.
So overall, feminist ethics critiques traditional frameworks for potential biases, like separating reason from emotion, favoring abstraction over context, and aims to develop theories that are truly inclusive, attentive to vulnerability, and promote genuine equality for all people.
It's about fundamentally rethinking what counts in moral deliberation.
Wow. Okay, we have covered a lot of ground. From consequentialism's focus on outcomes to deontology's emphasis on duty, virtue ethics' concern with character, Taoism's call for natural harmony, and feminist ethics' focus on care, context, and justice.
It's a rich tapestry of human thought about one of the most fundamental questions. How should we live? What is right?
And these aren't just abstract historical ideas, are they? They really do reflect different ways we think and act, maybe without even realizing it.
Whether you find yourself instinctively weighing the consequences, feeling bound by a promise, trying to be a good person, seeking balance, or prioritizing relationships, these frameworks are alive in our reasoning. Understanding them gives you a more powerful lens.
So let's bring it back to you, the listener, and back to that car dilemma. You've borrowed the car, need fuel, can't reach your friend.
What do you do now, thinking through these lenses?
Yeah, how would a strict utilitarian approach it? What calculation would they make about potential damage versus returning it empty?
What would a Kantian, bound by the duty not to potentially damage someone's property, or perhaps the duty to return it as agreed, which usually implies fueled, decide? What maxim could they universalize?
What would a virtue ethicist ask? What does being a good, responsible, considerate friend require in this situation?
How might a Taoist approach it? Perhaps acknowledging the uncertainty, not forcing a guess, maybe finding a middle way solution.
And someone guided by an ethics of care, how would they consider the specific relationship with the friend, their friend's potential needs or reaction, the trust between them?
Which of these frameworks resonates most with your gut feeling, and why?
Maybe the right answer isn't one single theory dominating all others. Maybe navigating your own moral maze involves drawing insights from different perspectives, making informed, thoughtful judgments as you go. Something to think about.